Hey, good morning, Professor Tootle.
Good morning.
So, do you like chit chat before we start talking history? I mean, what's the best? If we were trying to monetize the show, which we're not, but if we were, is it better to be human beings and chit chat, or is it better to start and saying in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue?
I have no idea. I
Yeah,
know
neither do I.
a lot of podcasts that I listen to will have started to have a kind of formula to them, and I think that must have something to do with the best way to engage listeners and monetize your podcast. But we
Yeah,
do
and I
that. We always chit chat before the mics heat, before we hit the record button.
right, but then we chit chat more. So I'm wondering whether I'm just not being an effective podcaster by chit chatting.
Well, I think about, I mean, I don't know, we're thinking about this in real time, but when am listening to a podcast, I listened to a couple this morning already, and I do fast forward until they start talking about the topic. So,
Okay, all right. So
so if
I
I
guess
was
we're
listening to
normal.
this
Okay.
podcast, I would skip through all of this. Uh,
Yeah, okay, good. Well, give me a one-liner on that. Was that true? How come we all know, still to this day, I think, I don't know about new kids, but in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Millions of us memorized that, and it seems natural and seems authentic. It seems truthful, right?
right?
Why do we put that in stone? He's the founder of America, right?
Uh, well,
Columbus Day celebration, right?
I mean, so is your question like how is collective memory? How does it become sort of solidified to the point where it's passed down to the next generation? How is it
And
that
is it
every
true?
generation of campers knows the same like campfire songs or something? Like if I
Yeah.
when I send my kids to when they go to camp, which they don't go to every year, but there's a Presbyterian camp out here called Calvin Crest, and the kids like to go. And somehow or other, they sing the same songs as the kids did in 1970. Is that your question?
Well, I think old wives' tales, I guess, is probably not politically correct to say old wives anymore. Maybe it's just fables is better. We want to be politically correct on the show. There's a difference between old wives' tales, though, and institutional culture. I mean, if you talk to my liberal friends, they think it's a part of I don't know, the white colonialism, European colonization of the world, and it's prejudice and based off evil. And it's just one of those traditions that are intentionally put into young minds to make them feel like they're superior against people that have a different background or culture. I mean, they think it's intentional and they don't like it. So, but does it matter that we have these, 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue and we have Columbus Day? Because a lot of people, including in Colorado, canceled Columbus Day and made it Indigenous Peoples Day.
Well,
So
I
what's
think
the truth?
I think the truth does matter, uh, but I
Okay.
also think that there's no way of you can't stop a collective memory, but you can influence a collective memory. Um, I mean, these are
And
all
who do
sort
we
of
want doing that? Who do we want doing that? People
we're
or
all
government?
well, we're all doing it. There's no to a greater or lesser extent, every single human being is part of the collective memory of everybody else. And there have been a
Well, let
few.
me switch gears now. Let
Okay.
me switch gears and you can go back to history. So I tried to give you a 1492 example. Let me give you this year's example. And we're not going to spend most of the time or even much of it on Trump. But Trump has solved 8 wars and is getting the FIFA Peace Prize for solving the war in Ukraine and Gaza and Israel and Rwanda and Congo. Isn't that amazing that he solved all these wars in 10 months?
He didn't solve any of them.
What do you mean he's getting the FIFA Peace Prize? Where's the
What? Yeah, I don't know. Who
truth?
cares? No, none of none of that's really true or matters or it
Well,
either.
wait, Professor, now I'm confused. You are like one of the subject matter experts. How many PhDs in history are there in America? Is it 1,000 or 10,000 or it's not 100,000? I mean, how
I
many
have no idea.
PhD in
Jake,
history professors are there?
the fact checker Jake, get on this right away. I'm sure it's
Thanks.
way more than we would suspect.
Well, it can't be. There's not that many history degrees out there, and especially people that get all the way to the PhD level.
I don't know. I mean, in the last few years with the proliferation of online degrees,
Oh, well, okay. Yeah, but still, there wouldn't be hundreds of thousands. Okay, we'll see
I
if
have
Jake can
no
come
idea.
up with a number. Well, but Professor, shouldn't we know whether the current president of the United States is solving conflicts or not? I mean, it
Yes,
seems
we
like that would
should.
be something we'd want to have a collective agreement on.
Yes, we should know that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful at least. Um, so, one more example. And I think the facts are still not out there. So that's why I'm asking you. I think the facts kind of are out there on the solving eight wars. Um, the situation where we're bombing people in the Caribbean. Did you get an answer? Hey, I was really close. Look at that.
8,500 history PhDs awarded from 2004 to 2013.
So
So,
that means there's probably what 20 or 30,000 living PhD history people.
yeah, I would
That's way
guess.
more than I thought. So if we were to pull all of those experts in history, we would and say, hey, George Washington and his wooden teeth, or it was Lincoln racist, or was Jefferson, did he have slaves or not? It would be a vast majority, like 95% plus of PhD historians could agree about most facts about American history.
Well, I think most of them could agree on the a fair process for figuring out the facts, but in terms of the facts, I would say, the number of people who are, I mean, this is the thing. Like, just because I have a PhD in history, it doesn't mean I'm an expert in everything, but it does mean that I was instructed in a process, that comes up with a truth that's good enough to state as a truth claim.
So, so
I
where
would
do
hope
we?
that everybody would agree to that,
Well, I
broadly
know I'm
speaking.
kind of interrupting you for now. I'll give you more time to go expound exponentially. Um, so the eight wars that Trump, you just said, hasn't solved. Um, when do we believe you, or how much research do we have to do on our own to verify that statement? How do we rationally proceed as humans based off the available? We're all trying to work, we're all trying to
Right.
raise a family, we're all trying to do our own thing. We don't like history, or we at least not enough to study it. So we have to get our data and facts from somewhere enough to move on with our lives.
Yes. Yeah. When
So
when is the truth good enough?
yeah, yeah. Now expand, please.
Well, okay. And actually, it's funny. I had this conversation with two colleagues yesterday in the hallway, and one of them
Interesting.
was an English professor, and one of them was a philosophy professor. And they all thought that the way that, history makes truth claims was essentially incorrect. You know, and the philosophy professor kept saying it was acceptable to say, "In my opinion, this," or I feel like this is also the truth, and the English professor also thought that those were both fine. And I said, well, that, in my field is like absurd. It would lead to me curling up in the corner and crying and not being able to do any work because at a certain point, I need to write the sentence, disgruntled Marxist loner Lee Oswald killed John Kennedy. And then I just need to move on to the next sentence. And that and it means that the way that in history we are supposed to, I'll also caveat this by saying like I had a different experience than many other um, uh, historians, so maybe they don't, maybe they would disagree with this along the edges, but the people who I studied under said, well, basically, this is the process. What you do is you read it, you start by reading it as much as you can read in a reasonable amount of time. And what you want to read is you want to read on any subject, you want to read scholarly secondary sources, other historians who are of good character, who might make interpretive choices, guesses, or mistakes that you disagree with, but they aren't going to lie about what's in the sources. And then you want to contemplate the primary sources themselves. So I have an article.
Wait, Professor, sorry to interrupt. I was going to let you go unquestioned, but you said first you go to the secondary scholarly sources, not the primary sources
Yeah,
first?
I mean, in some ways, you got to stand on the shoulders of giants. But the other thing is that most topics come to you in an idiosyncratic way. So, in other words, I might stumble across a primary source that I then have questions about, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, "Well, what have other people studied this yet?" In other words, have other people solved this problem, and I don't have to. Uh, but then what will almost always happen is you'll realize, oh yeah, these other scholars have already studied this, but because of other mistakes in the historical record somewhere, the story of this primary source is kind of wrong. Um, so, sorry, I'm getting an echo. Somebody got there. I'm not sure why. Or it
I
went
heard
away.
it beep, but I don't have the echo
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it went away. The next stage of it is you gather up everything and you read everything. And I would say very much influenced by this historian named George Kotkin, and actually one of my professors at I hardly ever mention this guy, so maybe I should mention him. His last name was Bonstedt, and he was a German historian in Fresno. And I really didn't, not to show disrespect to Fresno State. But other than my association with Victor Davis Hanson, I didn't, I don't know. I shouldn't say anything else. But there was another historian there named Bonstedt who was very good. And he emphasized this point as well. But the biggest influence on me were the professors I had in graduate school, and by far Alonzo Hamby. And this is, I would even say like among my friends, we just call this kind of the Hamby method, which is just you read everything, you read every book, you read every article, you read every primary source, and then um, and then as to for what you do with that information and how it goes out into the world. th- um, I'm doing an article right now that when it's finished will be under 1,000 words. And it started as 25 pages of research. I read 1,000 pages. I read 1,000 pages worth of things. Then I took notes that were about 15 to 20 pages. And then I got it down to, 4 pages of narrative. And eventually when it appears, it's going to be 800 words.
Well, that's one or two pages, right?
Yeah, yeah. But, this has been a 3-month process involving thousands of pages because the idea is that when I'm doing history, this thing is supposed to be taught, it's supposed to be bulletproof. It's supposed to be eternal. I'm hanging a shingle out there and saying, like, that you should be able to read this in 50 years and it will still be accurate. Um,
Okay, now I need to interrupt you again, Professor, because why? Why are you personally, and supposedly you're implying the profession of historians need to be truth sayers? That's the critical element. Why aren't you advocating the cause celeb? Why are you not putting your position forth into the world and finding the right evidence to make sure we all keep in power? If we're in power, and if we're not in power, why aren't you gathering all the data to make sure we get in power? That's what we want. We want a home, and we want food, and we want power, and we want prestige, and we want trips, and that's what we should be fighting for. We want to win, Professor. We don't want the truth.
well, let's see. Assuming that I'm a human being and that I have the same, uh, I don't know, desire matrix as everybody else, it's that throughout my life I've collected this group of, 800 people, and I want prestige within that group of 800 people. So what I want more than money, more than power, more than anything else is I want my parents to be proud of me, my kids to be proud of me. I want to be able to sleep at night, not feel guilty. I want Tony Williams and Steve Knott and Tom Brasino, and I want to make Alonzo Hamby not ashamed that I was his student. In other words, I have this group of people who I um, I want them to be proud of me. That's what I guess.
Professor, I guess that's nice. Well, I shouldn't say that. That sounds like I'm not being honest. It is nice. That is delightful. Thank you. But you're describing some people that are no longer with us. They're deceased.
Yeah.
You just announced at least one person who's no longer with us, and you still want to make a deceased person proud. You have described people that I know because you've introduced me to them and we've interviewed them. Some are pro-Trump and some are anti-Trump, but you still want to make both of them proud. Are you real? Come on, we need a team here of alive people of advocating the cause of America. Because I know you're a super patriot in an authentic way, in the right way, and we're vulnerable to really nefarious characters out there. Truth is great, but not if we're going to lose. Not if we lose our lifestyle. We have to fight and use every tool at our resources, including lying if necessary, including killing people that may be innocent if necessary. We have to win, Professor.
Well, I believe that I really believe that what Calvin Coolidge said is true, that truth and freedom are inseparable. That as long as we dedicate ourselves to putting the truth into context, we're performing some act of patriotism because it is true that human beings are good enough to govern themselves. And if I focus on producing work that other scholars can use because it was produced honestly, then I am performing an act of patriotism, true patriotism. That there's no um, I you know that yeah, I don't know. I'll just leave it at
Okay.
that. True that as Calvin Coolidge said, truth and freedom are inseparable.
I love that quote. And my instinct now after 135 odd shows is that Calvin Coolidge is one of, if not your favorite president, one of your favorites. Mine's still Reagan, but it's based off emotion. Yours seems to be based off research and facts and analysis and study. There may be other presidents. Washington, that is probably Washington's your favorite because he solved the American problem. But the
Well,
Coolidge is the one that gave the
it's funny. I had maybe the best. You have these small moments as a teacher. I'm sure Jake can attest to this. That every now and then something happens that says, "Oh, this whole semester was worthwhile." And I
oh
had
me.
one of those moments last week. I had a question that a student asked that was so good, and it indicated you know, so much that I just thought, oh, that made this whole semester worthwhile. And but the question, for the purposes of because I think you would find this question interesting, that I said that George Bush was a conservative in the Republican tradition, and that Ronald Reagan was a someone who was a conservative intellectual, bringing the ideas of the conservative intellectual movement into the Republican Party. And then I just sort of moved on, and she stopped and she was like, "Explain to me what the difference is." And then she continued to ask a bunch of questions about that distinction. What's the difference between someone who is a Republican conservative versus someone who is influenced by the post-World War II conservative intellectual movement, trying to bring those ideas into the Republican Party, which is what Reagan was,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to someone who was trying to preserve the ideals of the old Republican Party.
And that's the answer.
Yeah, so, no, well, no, no, I mean, the answer was long, but I can go into more detail if you want. But one of the,
Yeah,
so
go
yeah,
into a
the
couple.
difference is that a Republican
Yeah,
conservative is somebody who's trying to preserve the ideals of Lincoln and his understanding of the founding. You know,
that's Bush.
yeah, that's Bush. So individual liberty, economic opportunity, and American exceptionalism. And then Reagan was, and we could have George Nash in here to describe this. He's the one who literally wrote the book on the subject. But the post-World War II conservative intellectual movement was that's where Reagan's conservatism came from. And that was free market, anti-communism, religion, and a sort of what you might call instinctive traditionalism, just don't change unless you have a reason to. and that fusionism that came out of the National Review post World War II conservative intellectual movement, and that's
Well,
different.
so they're
They were at
different.
odds with each other. Remember when National Review was founded, they were in opposition to Eisenhower. Eisenhower is a Republican conservative. So you would
Yeah,
think if their conversion of conservatism was the same, National Review wouldn't have had a problem with Eisenhower. They would have,
right.
but they
Well,
did.
so Professor, it's a good distinguishing characteristic between you, you're an intellectual academic, and me, because I understand your words and I kind of understand the philosophy, and then I go, yeah, okay, I'm kind of a fusion of both. Then I'm
Yeah,
comfortable
yeah.
with
But
I'm
that's
comfortable with both of those.
yeah, there's a lot of overlap. And then that's what essentially Reagan was doing was he was by bringing Bush on as his vice president, he was bringing these two versions together. And then in this sort of you talked about how a collective memory is created. Now we sort of think of them as being all one thing, that
Okay,
somehow it's
okay,
just Republican conservatism, or people will often say, I'm a Reagan conservative. And what does that mean? Well, it means that it's within the Republican Party, so it's not at odds with individual liberty, economic opportunity, and American exceptionalism, but it adds free markets as a good in and of themselves. It adds anti-communism as a good in and of itself, and it adds traditionalism as a good in and of itself.
ah, this is a delightful conversation. You still didn't. My original question though is between Washington, Coolidge, Reagan. Your favorite president, but I guess I should add in Hamilton, who wasn't a president. But give couple more lines on that. Who do you like quoting Coolidge more than any other president? Does
Well, I
that mean
just
he's
find
your
that
favorite?
Coolidge worked through many of the issues that seem to be vexing us today. So for
Talk
most
about
of my life, when politics was normal, I find I was always mentioning Eisenhower because Eisenhower was the one who had all the answers. But we seem to have lapsed back into the crisis of modernity from the 1870s to the 1930s. And because these are the questions that are being asked of me, I find myself going back to Calvin Coolidge, in part because there were a lot of other people who had good ideas, but Coolidge was also a very clear writer and a clear thinker. So when I'm trying to explain something clearly to
Yeah.
someone else, I lapse back into Coolidge because he's the one who said it most clearly and in the shortest way.
Okay, I got to switch gears because I want to get some other voices in here shortly, earlier than I normally do. But I have two or three main prongs before we get to that. And I guess they're almost personal. So I'm hoping you, again, go back to being my bartender or minister rather than my history professor
I'm
friend.
your history bartender. Maybe we should rename it because I hate the name Toodle Talks.
Oh, I love the name Toodle Talks. I get it why you wouldn't
I
like it. But
very much would prefer history bartender.
okay, well, maybe we'll switch to it at some point. So Dan Boningo, and I'm not a follower of his, so I don't know if I'm mispronouncing his name right. But he said something really shocking to me yesterday. He's the assistant director of the FBI, supposedly the number one powerful guy in the FBI, usually a career FBI person that runs the FBI while the FBI, whatever, powerful position. He was directly asked, hey, you said that the bomber was an inside job, that was the government planted those bombs. He goes, yeah, but that was when I was a columnist or a reporter, an op-ed person. I was paid to give my opinions. Now I'm here for the government, and I have to tell the truth. When I'm no longer government, I'm going to go back to being an opinion person. And I know I shouldn't be shocked by that stuff, but it seems like you should take your philosophy and your character with you from journalism or even entertainment journalism to government to professorship to retirement and writing a book. It seems like you'd want to have a core you. And now I get wild. What is it? What WWV? It used to be black and white wrestling on TV. Yeah, you weren't born when it was black and white, but I watched it when it was black and white. And the Crusher came out, and the Gagne brothers, and the Hulk. I mean, there was people, and they had a persona. And I get entertainment. I get the perception that you're the good guy or the bad guy, and we're all entertained by that. And so maybe I'm just confusing that some news isn't news, it's just entertainment. And we all know that. So why do I keep going back to, well, it should be, the
Well,
opinion columnist should be
the
authentic?
president the president of the United States is a game show host who pretended to be rich, and people thought he was a successful businessman. So of course this is a problem of political discourse today. You know, yes, I agree. And is your question, does your core character, should it carry through each of these?
Even if you're an actor for a little bit of your life, you should still be a authentic, truthful actor. Even if you're lying to be a bad character, eh, that's playing the character for that role in that part. But you should still go back to your core instinct, shouldn't you? I
Well,
don't
I
get it.
guess I can work from the sort of fiction down, or I can work from the truth up. But you know, Richard Nixon used to watch the movie Patton to, pump
I
himself
love
up.
Patton. I think it's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And we might find out someday that the only thing guiding American foreign policy right now is that people in the Trump administration watched Tom Clancy movies from the 80s and 90s. You know, this we might just be trying to reenact the movie Clear and Present Danger. Isn't that the one where the drug smugglers and we might find that
Love
out
that
later.
book.
But let
I
me
haven't watched most of the movies, but the books are good. They're just
yeah,
good
yeah, they're
information.
great books, but it's like somebody or everyone in his administration watched those movies and got the wrong message. I mean, I've heard commentators keep referring to the the killing of the two sailors in the Caribbean as "Who Ordered the Code Red," which is a reference to a movie. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
who
Well,
is it who ordered the
and they were
illegal?
narco terrorists, Professor. I can't believe you
Well,
said
I just
sailor.
don't even, but again, were they even narco terrorists? Because the word narco terrorist has a definition too. I'm not convinced. The administration has produced no evidence that, I mean, a narco terrorist would have been like when Al Qaeda was using the drug trade to fuel its ideological mission. Drug cartels who who are just trying to make money and engage in acts of violence in order to make money, that's not narco terrorism. That's not narco terrorism directed at the United States. So even that, I want to, I would say, like, what are we
Excellent
even
distinctions.
talking about here?
I'm glad I'm glad I tried to jab you. That's an excellent distinction. So thank you. I
Um,
wanted to grasp that distinction before, and I think you're right. I think you're right. Well done.
they don't have I just mean they don't have an
Yeah,
ideological mission.
yeah.
They're not, out to spread
Well,
Islam.
so is it possible to have a certain segment of people believe that these bombs planted on January 6th were an inside job, and now we're all mad at the government and we don't trust the FBI, and all of a sudden now you're in the FBI and go, oh no, it's a and just yeah, that's I had a job to do, an opinion, I made up stuff.
Well,
Uh, I, I think
no,
there's
no
damage to
point.
our system.
So at no point do I think that a good person should be making up stuff that hurts America intentionally. But let me say this. There is a point at which it is incumbent upon everyone to do a little bit of thinking about how information comes to them. For instance, what we're doing right now is probably the lowest level of of truth creation, which is I'm trying to tell the truth, but I bet in every single episode I say things that are wrong.
Yeah.
This stuff is just coming off the top of my head. We're just having a conversation. But so I told you about the process for when I'm doing history, but I also had a professor, Jeffrey Herf, who was a genuine intellectual, a liberal intellectual, and and I remember a conversation that he had with this other historian, Beer Prize winner Steve Miner, and even though this is a private conversation, I don't think I'm revealing anything bad about these guys, but one of the things that either Miner or Herf said, and I don't remember who said it, but was that any statement is worth a vigorous overstatement. And Herf would always say that because at one point he was a senior editor at the New Republic. So he said, when I'm doing history, you know, I'm doing this. You know, I'm collecting all this information and I'm putting it together. And man, if you read any of his history books, they are bulletproof. You know, but then he said, when I'm being an intellectual, what I'm doing is I am putting an idea out there for debate. You know, I'm overstating some case so that I can get the pushback. So that, you know, and in other words, in order to move this conversation along, I'm stating this thing as if it's true so that other people will disagree with me and I will know the weaknesses of my own argument. And
Okay, I actually accept that. I think that's
but that is also
intellectually
something that happens at a very high level and that regular people are not engaged in, right?
right.
But
Oh
then
well,
there, oh, go
well,
ahead.
well, hold on, Professor. I think they're engaged in that on a daily basis at the bar. They go, "I'm a tough guy." They don't just say, "I'm kind of tough. I could do." I'm a really tough guy. Everybody over exaggerates their case when they're trying to get the girl or guy. I think humans are prone to exaggerate and be extemporaneous or
But
what.
but is it part of some process that is about truth seeking? In other words, Jeffrey Hirsch wasn't
Yes, they want the
up
girl
there
or
and
the guy.
saying, I
What?
no, but wanting to get the girl is not wanting to seek the truth. You know, wanting when Jeffrey Hirsch is stating something in an editorial,
Okay, I'm following you.
his goal is to get at the truth, and he wants the best argument, with meaning that your goal is I want to find out if I'm wrong.
Okay, Professor, I think we're at the point where I was trying to get to. There is a healthy minority. I don't think it's a majority, but there's a healthy minority of America right now today that is more comfortable with the thug, with the brute, with the power, a few good men. They want the truth. You can't handle the truth. The truth is we're defending America. Damn it, that's what's important. We are a powerful country, and if in order to stay a powerful country, we got to do whatever is necessary to remain a powerful country. And that means lie, cheat, steal, kill, do whatever. I think there's a healthy minority of the country that truly believes that.
But here's the thing. Like I said, these are people who watch those movies and they didn't understand them. At the point when Jack Nicholson says you can't handle the truth, he's wrong. And
Right.
the
It was
lesson of that
actually Tom
movie
Cruise.
is that
Tom Cruise is the hero in that movie,
right.
not Jessup.
Yeah, because it is and now I'll get to bring in Eisenhower, because it is not true that we need to lie or cheat or steal. The thing that does make us powerful is our free institutions based on truth. That's the
God,
thing.
I love it.
It's not, we do not need to break the rules. It's the following of the rules, it's the seeking of truth that has made the United States the richest, most powerful, wealthiest, most prosperous, with the most deadliest military in the history of the world. And in each of these cases, it's not by a little bit, it's by a lot. And Eisenhower understood this. I mean, if you want to read a primary source on this, get your fingers out, people. Go and look up NSC 162/2. That that was Eisenhower's national security policy, where he says the thing that makes us free is our free institutions. That's how we're going to win the Cold War. That's what we need to preserve in order to preserve America's strength. That that there's this perception out there somewhere that somehow dictatorships are more powerful than us. They're not. Freedom works better than any of those proposed authoritarian solutions. You want to make America more like Russia? Like I wish Jake was still on. Somebody look up the GDP of Russia compared to the GDP of the United States. You know, if you want to make America like Russia, you are trying to turn America into a poor, weak, third world country ruled by arbitrary violence. That is completely absurd.
Gosh, I love this show. Thank you. I want to switch gears slightly now on truth. You still have. I just looked it up. Here it's right in front of me. Your bio, the way you're presenting yourself to the people that are most important to you, friends and acquaintances, 1.5 thousand followers of you. Your bio to impress them is just another sin on this globe of sin.
Yep.
You stand by that, Professor? Is that a good bio? Why aren't you trying to put yourself out in the world? And you're the I claim you're the one of the best conservative PhD history professors in America, advocating for the cause of American socialism, it properly understood. And then you have that bio for me. How am I supposed to brag on you with that damn bio?
Well, I I guess um I don't know. I just don't because I don't care. And um
Or is
or
it the opposite? You really care.
well, I mean I guess I don't care about impressing people outside of my little tribe of people I care about. Um, and and I really think that the any influence I have comes from um, uh, people trusting that I'm trying to do the right thing. And to be
Yeah.
honest and
Yeah.
to tell the truth to other people is the first step to that is admitting that I am flawed and I'm fallen and I require grace. Uh, and I mean, I was teaching the Lincoln Second Inaugural last week to one of my classes, and Lincoln gets a compliment from this politician named Thurlow Weed. Great old timey name, Thurlow, last name Weed, and Lincoln writes him back and says, "Well, you know, everybody likes a compliment, but my little notification speech, meaning his second inaugural, he says, I don't think it's going to be immediately popular because people don't like being told when there's been a difference between God and themselves. But he said, whatever humiliation there is in me, I have to tell it. And that's how I hope that I approach studying the history, which is that, you know, I'm working really hard on this article on John Quincy Adams and the gag rule, and maybe nobody will read it, but this is how much work it takes to do good work. And I'm capable of doing that work, so it seems to have fallen to me to do this. So I'm doing my little part. Um, because
Lovely.
this is just the duty that has fallen to me today. And
Lovely.
I mean, and getting back to our old Theodore Roosevelt, you know, I care about the man who takes the next step, not the man who theorizes about the 200th step. Like, I'm, I shouldn't just sit around and say, "Hey, world, this is how you should be doing history." Like, I gotta actually do it myself sometimes, but it's time consuming.
Yeah. And Professor, I know you know this with your friends because we've interviewed a ton of them, and then I spy on you occasionally and see what other people say about you behind your back. And actually, I had one say right to my front, a former student of yours, and I had a conversation this last week, and I said, "So what? Why are you? Why do you like Professor Tootle?" And she goes, "Oh, I disagree with him on all sorts of stuff, but I always feel like he comes forward with it without an agenda to try to persuade me that I'm wrong. He presents all the information and has us think through things, and he's just sincere." Oh, what a nice compliment! You know, he's just you're trying to help people, let them live their lives.
Well, and here's the other thing. I don't, and I've never understood this. Do you want your life to be based on lies? I mean, how do you think that's going to help you? You know? So, um, I go at it from the idea that if the truth seeking is, you should want to base your political beliefs on the truth. And if you need to lie, then maybe you need to examine your political beliefs. Because if you have political beliefs that require lying as part of it, um, maybe you should take another look in the mirror.
Lovely. I think I still want to bring up two other quick issues. Yeah, let's do this in 3 minutes, 5 minutes or less. Two different issues, both somewhat related to truth and facts and what it means to be an American. I am of the opinion that much of our current battles between the Republicans and Democrats, and the reason people are able to switch their views so unevenly with no logic, to take contrary positions to what they were just a few years ago, and to seem to have no ethical dilemma over that at all, or even acknowledgement that it's a dilemma at all. They don't care whether it were a war or whatever, just all sorts of crazy stuff, is because of abortion. It is a deep-seated view of many on both the pro-choice and the pro-life side, that it is deeply religious, deeply philosophical, deeply human arguments on both sides. And I have two in Colorado. I have two friends, and they're both acquaintances. They're not dear friends; they're acquaintances, friends. One is one of the predominant pro-life leaders in Colorado. He's led the amendments to ban abortion in Colorado. So if you're pro-choice, you hate him. I have another friend who's a traditional feminist. She is classic Democratic liberal feminist who has protected the rights to abortion and successfully succeeded in putting Colorado's abortion amendment. So the two most powerful people, probably, or at least top five in each, top three in each. These are really powerful people. Have diametrically opposed views on abortion, and I like them both. I really do. There's a lot to like in both of them. I know enough to know their families and their backgrounds and why they're passionate. I don't think they're doing this out of entertainment, or I don't think they're doing it out of a job. I think they're both deep-seatedly correct in their moral views. And I'm pretty sure, I haven't asked them, but I'm pretty sure they both kind of hate each other. So I don't like that aspect of their background. I think they truly hate each other. One thinks it's murder, and the other thinks it's taking away the right to a woman's ability to control her life. And they're mad at each, or at least mad at each other. I think they probably hate each other. So how are we supposed to engage in these really deep? How are Americans supposed to engage in these deep-seated opinions that we're not going to fix this year or next year or 50 years from now? Even with technology, this is still going to be a litmus test issue. How do we engage with each other as Americans over this? I've just
Well,
told you how I do,
yeah,
but
I mean,
most people don't.
the thing is um, that hard work takes time, and you have to have some sort of dedication to it. Me, like I said, me spending all these hours writing this little tiny thing, that's real work. It takes time. If I if you were to tell me like you need to get these two people to agree on a political agenda, I would tell you that yes, I could probably get those two people to agree on, 99 out of 100 positive steps that in issues dealing with women's health that would represent like a positive legislative agenda. But how that would have to happen is first you'd have to have two people who are sincere about it. And then I would have to get into a room with them for say 3 to 4 hours a day for 10 weeks.
So
And
you're now a marriage counselor,
well,
a
no, I
literal
wouldn't have to be
college
a
marriage
marriage
counselor.
counselor. I would just have to say like, what is it you really want? What do you want? What is the thing you're trying to accomplish? And and you say, all right, like, um, and then ask like, what are the limits? Are we going to agree that we're gonna reach some things that laws can't solve? And so begin this process with um, a boy and a girl. uh, uh, what kind of man are we creating, and what kind of woman? And then what is it that causes them to get together, have unprotected sex, and then um, get to the point where they have an unplanned pregnancy, then work through all of the things that could happen at that point, and why, what solutions or alternatives could we explore to, in, in other words, um, there's no reason for many of these problems to even exist. Um, they only seem insurmountable because both sides see the other side as, um, and I guess this is true. Maybe I think there are people on sort of both sides of this issue that are just sort of monsters, you know, like evil people with evil motives or something, like, but I would say, I don't think that that's the majority of people who have strong feelings about that issue. But yes, that it would take long, serious, hard work. Um,
Interesting. I'm glad for that example. Let me give you one more, and this needs to even be briefer. I have now internally, so it's not internally because I'm telling you and it's going on the internet, and so I'm not there yet. I am still internally. I've come to the conclusion just this last week, which is really weird after 59 years of public policy and studying this stuff pretty hard since for a teenager. I've always been for capital punishment. Always. It's been like one of my bedrock beliefs that when you take somebody else's life, you kind of forfeit your own. It's just such a horrible crime, such a horrible thing you've done to that person, the lack of opportunity and for them to do whatever they were going to do, and then the loss of all their family and friends. We shall not take another's life. And if you do, sorry, you're forfeiting your own. That's been my position for my entire life. In fact, I had one of my most vigorous, um, pretty aggressive. I was a jerk. Private conversation with Governor Hickenlooper, who's now a U.S. Senator, just the two of us. And we argued about this for an hour because he was pardoning a murderer that close to my home. And I just was pissed. Oh my God, I was pissed. There was no doubt that he murdered. It was a cold-blooded murder, like 3 people. And anyway, I am now starting to think that maybe I just need to be uh, against capital punishment. I think, and it's because of these boats, and I don't want to switch my whole life's perspective on the U.S. killing boats, but I just think without a better evidence, we're either in war, and then we don't care about the names of people because we're in war. But if we're in war, we should have Congress approve it. If we're not in war, wait, are we the world's police force? Why are we down there being a police, but we're not being a police? We're actually killing them. So there's no evidentiary. The whole thing is so icky to me. And I'm not even talking the second strike. I'm talking all the strikes. I'm not sure we're putting out America's best foot to the world by
oh,
saying that, hey,
I'm sure we're not. We're
yeah,
we're we're undoing centuries of work that has been done to create the laws of war, the laws of engagement, and how we deal with other nations. It's all, and
well,
I would say you're reasonable to have this happen in the last week, because what we have seen is that we now have a federal government, that is willing to allow people to kill people, and either encourage it, um, incentivize it, and if it is a murder, not prosecute it, and if prosecuted, pardon it.
yeah, and also memify it to a turtle a cartoon turtle shooting it to take away life and then
Yeah,
trivialize life.
trivialize it. Yeah, but I would say that would fall under incentivize it. Create a
Yeah,
culture.
yeah, yeah.
So of
And the
course, I
same,
would say,
and I guess the reason, and Professor, we're also doing it at the same time. And what I know about Somalians is like zero. I don't know any Somalians. Maybe I've met some. I don't, but truly, I have like zero. I haven't researched. I haven't Googled it. I know nothing about Somalians, and
But you
I
don't
don't
have
know.
to
I
know
don't know.
anything about Somalians in order to have a position on how each individual should be treated.
Thank you. You can't just group hundreds of thousands of them and say they're all terrorists and they
Right,
shouldn't
and
be
you
here.
can't base American policy on that either. That's
So I'm right to be perturbed on what the truth is, or concerned on where we are as a nation,
yes,
right?
yes.
Okay. All right. That's not a great place to end my interviewing. Professor,
Well, I
I'm
always thought that the
besides.
best argument against capital punishment, which was George Will's old argument, he's been making this argument for probably 30 years. But he said, the reason I'm against the death penalty is because I'm a conservative, and the death penalty is a government program, and I believe all
Mhm.
government programs fail. Uh, and right now, the Trump administration is killing people, and we can't undo that. We can't bring people back to life. So you're absolutely right to say that right now I have no faith that the system is working because, um, again, people seem to be willing to not be applying equality in the law, not applying laws, not being held responsible for breaking laws, incentivize the breaking of laws, not prosecuting when laws are broken, and pardoning those lawbreakers if they do happen to get prosecuted. So um, it's entirely reasonable right now. I would say I'm going to set aside every thought I've ever had about the death penalty and say that as long as Donald Trump is president of the United States, we probably shouldn't have a death penalty, you know. And
But I'm semi surprised at your answer. So it's actually very helpful for me. I had no idea how you'd respond to that, you got lots of
well, I
things to give
never
my
thought
brain.
about it until you brought it up. I mean, it's like so much of our system is based on faith and trust, and and where we would typically, if we were going to say go to war, we would want to see some kind of argument, and it would be something would be presented to Congress, who would then approve it. But none of that is happening. It, it is.
And it pains me deeply. I take no joy in other people failing, including the president of the United States, who I've never voted for, the President Trump. I don't want him to fail because I don't appreciate his policies and don't think he believes in the Constitution. I still don't want him to fail. But more important than Trump is there's these people that are sworn to uphold the Constitution, all these officers who've served decades and then maybe just years, the actual person who's flying the drone, maybe just years, maybe they just graduated from college. Yeah, there's this whole chain of command who are serving our country.
Yeah.
We're put in a really bad situation because of this. And maybe it is okay. Maybe all the facts will come out and you and I are wrong. I just think that a good, healthy, probably even a majority of the country doesn't think it's a good thing, and so they have this view of the military as being ruthless, cold-blooded killers. And in war, I guess you want some of that. Well, maybe a lot of it,
Well,
but
in war, but this is not a war. I I don't understand it. Again, if this was a war, then we would be fighting a war, and the rules of war would apply.
okay, I'm glad I asked it in this way and you answered in that way because it gets to the point of the show. My friends, dear friends, say, John, these drugs are killing hundreds of thousands of Americans every year. And every time we kill one of these narco
First of
terrorists
all,
or drug,
let's just all right. Let's start there. That's a lie. Like fentanyl is killing people, but the things that we're blowing up are cocaine. And when what's her name, Kristi Noem said, "Hey, thank you, Mr. President. You've saved hundreds of thousands of lives this year because you've stopped cocaine from coming into America." This is something we can look up. Like if Jake was here, look up how many people died of cocaine overdoses in the United States, uh, and then look and see if that number went up or it went down, and find out if it is in fact hundreds of thousands. And we would find that first, it went up, not down. Second, that it's not hundreds of thousands, it's tens of thousands. So, A, what he's doing is not saving hundreds of thousands of lives. It did not save hundreds of thousands of lives. And it's directed at a drug that is not affecting hundreds of thousands, causing hundreds of thousands of deaths. And uh, what he's doing would have no effect on it, and is having no effect on it. So, again, I would say facts sort of matter in all of these cases. Like, I would just simply say to your friend who says, "Hey, Trump is saving hundreds of thousands of lives with these attacks," and I'd say, "All right, friend, look up Trump administration CDC numbers on how many people are dying because of cocaine, and let's."
And by the way, sorry to be a flighty with you. I've seen those articles. We're 100% sure, or 99.9% sure that these drug boats, probably not fishermen boats, they're probably drug boats, are those. But we know that they're cocaine. We know they're not fentanyl. I keep seeing that no fentanyl comes out of.
No idea. I mean, because again, the Trump administration has provided no evidence. So, and it's not like we haven't, we don't have the ability to stop these boats and search them. We already have that ability. So I don't know why we're blowing them up. When there's absolutely no need to blow them up.
Well, aren't we just sending a message to the world? Don't mess with us. Don't mess with Texas. I mean, don't mess with the United States. Isn't that?
But I guess it would be like saying, I don't care if this person is guilty of this crime. I'm going to execute him on my front lawn in order to send a message that I'm willing to murder innocent people.
Well, but that was done against blacks in the South. There's a method of terrorizing
Was it
that.
right?
Well, I mean, but
Yeah,
that's, I mean,
like,
it's,
yeah, like, I mean, was it right to murder? So I guess I just would say, I would try to get your friends to say, like, is it your argument that the US government should murder innocent people um, in order to send a propaganda message to the world that we are willing to murder innocent people? Is that really your political position? And I bet your friends would say, no, that's not my political position. Of course not. I'm trusting that the Trump administration is doing the right thing. And you say, well, let's look up their statements. Let's go through each statement that they made, and you pick, and let's see if there's any evidence for any of this. And if you don't trust me, trust the Trump administration's own numbers, right? Like, and see if they're
so
telling.
Professor, so Professor, you're like me in different ways, but you're like me. You're just beside yourself right now with our contemporary way of debating and campaigning and governance. This is just a really weird, bad time in
Yeah, it's
American.
uniquely bad. I would say the only thing I can kind of compare it to would be, Andrew Jackson or Franklin Pierce or I mean, we haven't had a president this bad in, since the Pierce and Buchanan. Um, he's really bad.
Okay. And this isn't just you. We could interview these 20,000 historians, and sure, there's some ultra conservative historians, I assume, but almost all of them would be beside themselves with what we're doing.
Oh, and I would say uh, yeah, I'm probably in the 0.01% of history PhDs uh, who would be um, at least willing to even entertain the idea that Trump might be telling the truth. Other
Okay, so
that
maybe it wasn't a good.
99.9% of other historians would be
Well,
far
but
more.
maybe I'm proving Trump's point by asking that question then. Well, of course, higher education needs to be disbanded. It's crazy. They're all a bunch of liberals indoctrinated with America bad
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, yeah, he's right.
Okay, fair enough. I love that. I love that you said that. Okay, I need to get to Jeff and Bart and Sandon. So, sorry to have a convoluted show as I often do, but you've given me lots of handholds to think about for the next week. So I really appreciate that. Jeff, Bart, or Sandon, who's up for a question or conversation? Come on, gentlemen, help me out. Well, either they didn't like my questions, Professor, or okay, here we go, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm struggling to get my thing to. There we go. No, this I was struggling at first to figure out how to put this all together, but then it has tied together nicely here at the end. And John, it raises something that happened in one of your Facebook posts this week. A friend of yours was responding to things you were talking about, and he agreed with all of the positions you took and then said, but I still support Trump, and here's why. And he gave his reasoned response. And I realized, and this is kind of what you guys are talking about, there are people in this country who no longer care about how something's done. They just want something done. And they haven't been educated enough about civics to understand that the getting it done the way it's being done undoes so much of what makes this country work correctly and what protects their rights that they eventually will care about. And it's really eye-opening to me because you guys know I've been struggling for a long time with how people can still support, and I've come to two things. One is that people just like things getting done and they don't really care and don't want to spend the effort, as Professor Tootle said. It takes effort to educate yourself and stay educated. And two, there are lots of people who don't care at all, aren't even paying attention, and if asked, they just pick who they have heard about most. So that's a polling problem. But anywai, that was
No,
my
I think
reaction to.
yeah, you're right, absolutely right. Um, and I would say it's even you're correct, and it's worse than that. So we begin with something we've said on the show before, which is that people don't care about process, and we've quoted Sarah Isgur and said,
Other than
that
elites, I love that.
yeah,
Yeah,
that like she said, I'm a process girl in an outcomes world, but I would even say it's worse than that because I would say people care about the perception of things being done, and it's even worse than that. They don't even care if anything is being done. They want to be able to pretend that someone that they don't like is being punished.
yeah,
They don't even care if someone is even being punished. They don't care about the problem. In other words, they they want they so don't care about process that they don't care if what they're doing even solves the problem. Because here's the thing, if we wanted to solve the problem and Trump was willing to, if we define the problem as drugs coming from South America, is that the problem we're trying to solve? And then he were to send the giant US Navy there. And then he would go after the boats, following the rules and capturing them, and it would be far more effective than what he's doing. So why is he doing something else? He must be doing something else because he doesn't actually care about the problem being solved.
yeah.
He wants to be able to pretend that the problem is being solved. And his defenders don't actually care if the problem is solved. They just want to be able to pretend that the problem is being solved.
Yeah,
Okay, you were both depressing me.
it's the old adage that Bart and John will appreciate from law school. The facts in this case, however interesting, are irrelevant. The Trump administration doesn't have any tie to the facts. They just have tie to the perception. But Professor Tootle, this goes back to your question about why would anybody want to live their life relying on lies? And I pondered that, and it really comes back to people are taught, and it may be inherent, that you need to win, that everybody needs to win, and either you're winning individually or you're winning for your tribe. And often, in order to win, you have to see things the way the tribe sees them, or you have to stretch the truth in order to get people to agree with you. And that's troubling. I appreciate your approach to things, but I think most Americans are more interested in winning than in living in truth.
Yeah, right. But that's
Well,
why,
I haven't.
it gets back to John's question of why my bio is what it is. Like, it's because like I can't, I'm not going to base my bio on like what the world wants to value. Like, look at, come on. I have to think about what good people would value, and build out from
Well,
there.
Yeah.
and similarly, Professor, I don't want to reveal many or probably any in the public internet my sins and failures and flaws, which are many. But that doesn't mean that I admire my sins and flaws and foibles, and I,
Yeah,
I I resent and regret, and I'm pissed off at most
right.
of them. And
Exactly.
so when I see people, what Jefferson or Lincoln or Washington, I mean, yes, they had sins and flaws, but I don't want to focus entirely on those. I want to look at the overall human being and take the good and go, that was unfortunate. What a bad time that was. And I guess it's the same with my abortion friends. They're good people, but I'm telling you, they're both good people. But yeah, okay, man, they're pretty intense on this issue, and they sure hate the other side. It looks like, okay, well, we've all got failures, or we all got limitations.
But if you
I
can, but like, if you can access the good version of them and then just continue to build on that, you would
yeah,
you would find that like that okay, if the good version of you is somebody who cares about the truth and is actually trying to help people, and you just have to keep reminding people like, hey, remember you're a good person and you're trying to actually solve the problem, not pretend to.
yeah, lovely. I really appreciate this conversation, Jeff. Last bite at the apple for you.
I have one that's off topic, but it goes back to something we talked about earlier.
Go
So
for
if
it.
there's time at the very end.
I bet
No,
there'll
just
be
ask
time.
it
So,
now.
okay,
I want
Professor,
random
this is
now.
the show, so ask away.
Okay, so both of you, in fact, I think, posited that today's Supreme Court is possibly the best ever.
Yes, and I love
Do
your
you,
question coming up.
do you still support that in light of reading the decision on the Texas gerrymandering?
Yes,
Yes,
Why?
because how political, essentially, someone has to draw up maps. This is the problem that the Supreme Court and always has, is that these maps have to come from somewhere. And all the Supreme Court keeps reiterating over and over again is that it can't be courts that do it. It is entirely legal for a state to make bad laws for itself using politics to gerrymander districts. States
perfectly
have
legal.
the
Yep,
But that's not
it's
that
perfectly legal.
wasn't that was the essence of their decision, but that wasn't the problem that they were grappling with. The problem they were grappling with was that the legislature's map had a racially discriminatory effect.
Right.
And as we all know, the Supreme Court has said the intent is one thing, but if it has an effect that causes an unconstitutional effect, that has to be taken into account by the court.
Yeah, but if it is incidental, uh, and um, and it's just happens to correlate, um, that the partisan gerrymander is a problem not to be solved at the Supreme Court.
But what the Supreme Court did was said, we're not even going to think about whether it was incidental or intentional.
Yeah.
We're just going to pretend. Let me pull up this really.
And Jeff, by the way, with your lawyerly probing of Professor Tootle, I agree with you if that's what they did. But Professor Tootle's, I still agree more with Professor Tootle that I'm not sure that's what the legislature did, was to try to minimize minority rights. I think they wanted more Republican congressmen. That was what they did, and the court and the court said, "Nah, yeah, you have the right to do that. It's not pretty,"
Yeah,
or they didn't say that.
Well,
The truth is, it's
and to
not
be
pretty.
even more limited, it's that we don't have the right to stop it.
but they do. But they did. The 14th Amendment requires them to stop it if it has that uh,
Effect.
racially. Yeah, and what one of the two grounds on which they reversed was that the lower court failed to honor the presumption of legislative good faith,
Mhm.
which to me is a complete abdication of responsibility. So I
You're
will
making
tell
great
you
points.
that I
Right,
will
but
tell you that
you'd have to prove that there, and that was not
yeah,
in evidence.
you guys know I haven't quite been adopting your view that this is a great court, and I've explained
Of
why.
course
But
not.
I'll admit that this one brought me to, this may actually be a court that goes down in history as one of the worst. So
Okay, Jeff,
history will
let's
tell.
see if you'll give me this, Jeff. If the same court, the U.S. Supreme Court, makes the California redistricting unconstitutional while keeping Texas, then I think you're right.
I have to parse that, but I think I agree with that.
Professor, what do you think? If the
I
Supreme
know, John,
Court,
you make the same point. Yeah. That, I mean, what happened in California is, I mean, I walk to work and I live across the street from where I work, and I live in one congressional district and I work in another one. Like my city was last divided in three. And the college where I work at had two congressmen because there was an apartment complex that had a lot of Democrats in it that the college bought and tore down. And it just that apartment complex was in another congressional district. So as of right now, before our new maps go into effect, my college has two congressmen on one campus. Uh, and this was all done just to get rid of Devin Nunes. Like to break up his district into three districts to get rid of one congressman.
Which,
It's,
according to the Supreme Court, is perfectly legal.
yeah, which according to the Supreme Court is perfectly legal. And
Yeah,
if we want, as citizens of California, if we want to stop this, we need to elect different people to the Assembly and the state Senate.
well, what we need is a Congress that will pass an anti-gerrymandering law that applies everywhere.
Yeah, but I just don't. I mean, I guess
well, or we allow federalism to work, Jeff, and some states do it backwards and we just have to swallow that, and some states are more thoughtful and we applaud that, and
yeah, I
the
guess
experiments
I
of
would
state.
wait to see. Yeah, John, that's more what I would want is some state should pass. I mean, some version of a law that actually has been demonstrated to work, and then I'd like to see other states try it out, and um, and then either keep it at that level or I mean because I asked AI. It's funny, this is one of the things that my the AI tools that my work will pay for that has been blocked, so people were doing it, which is I said, what would the California congressional districts look like if you did nothing but follow the laws about how we're supposed to draw up the districts in California? And essentially, it came up with a map that looked like um, counties and combining counties.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but we don't do that. But maybe there's some version of that because you think about like, uh,
Well, Colorado's pretty close, Professor. Our nonpartisan redistricting commission is you look at our congressional maps in Colorado, and they make sense.
well, I just remember, I don't know if this is still true, or you Colorado guys can tell me this, that what it looked like when you could tell the minute you were driving and you got into Weld County because there were just housing developments
Yeah.
everywhere
Yeah.
and there was nothing. And then you'd hit that Weld County line and it would just be like, here are all the apartment complexes and housing developments because Weld County would allow people to build and the surrounding counties would not. Is that
Well,
still
that's true, but how does that affect redistricting? That seems like a different point.
well, I mean, that uh, it means that there are often population centers that are just across county lines under
Nope.
extraordinary circumstances when you have such a partisan division between counties. So, at any rate, I'm just saying, like, county lines aren't going to be perfect, and maybe we need to acknowledge that before we
No.
just go out there and wave our sign and say, "Hey, county lines will be perfect." Like,
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
still going to be an imperfect solution, even if we did things like that, because
As
of edge cases like this where you see such a strong partisan divide between counties.
By the way, Professor and Jeff, you'd appreciate this too, Bart, and so would Bart. I was discussing with a conservative friend of mine, a former state legislator, if my memory is correct, about U.S. Senate appropriation or votes to the Electoral College and how that's unfair. I was arguing with a liberal friend who said, it's unfair and I was saying, it's actually what it is. Then the legislator said, well, we should actually have state representatives in Colorado have one per county. And so it just works out pretty nice. 64 counties, you do 65. And I said, that is insane. Now, there's one county in Colorado with 1,000 residents, and I'm not going to allow my 700,000 people in Arapahoe County have one representative and you get one in 1,000. No, that's hurting your argument. Don't make that argument.
But the argument could be something like, you know, you take county lines into account, and then, but it's kind of the weird thing. Every state draws up their counties in a different way. Ohio has 88 counties and they're all tiny, right? And this is also, we see this problem in, I have friends who work in federal things that deal with federal housing. And they always say it's so unfair that because counties in the West are big, they're considered uh, metropolitan areas because in the Visalia Porterville metro area, there's close to 1 million people. So therefore, Tulare County um, is not a rural county, even though. So it means we don't qualify for all these federal housing programs. Whereas, like, you go on the East Coast, and it's like this little rich area outside of Boston
Yeah.
it somehow qualifies as a rural county. Whereas like we have these townships of 300 farm workers and 15 miles or 100 miles away from anything, and that's not rural. Like,
It
anyway.
reminds me, Professor, one more side story on this. I've got a friend who's the former county assessor, and then we're talking. I live right next to a very wealthy neighborhood, and $5 million homes and on acreage, horse acreage, and one family grows, I don't know, a couple hundred pumpkins every year, and then has a sign out say pumpkins for sale for a couple weeks. Well, it's because their whole property is zoned agricultural because they grow pumpkins. That is such crap. I mean, because it's a huge tax difference. I mean, an astronomical tax difference for a residential home versus a farm. So, uh,
But if
things are.
people really cared about this, we could come up with rules and say, like, look, if a town if you say a congressional district, how many people live in a congressional district? What's the average? And
900,000, I think, something.
yeah, so you say, like, all right, look, if we have a city with under 900,000 people, you don't get to break it up. You know, like that people who live in cities are, have an interest in having a representative. Like the idea that
And
you would be in order to get my current congressional districts, you had to not just break up Tulare, you had to break up Visalia. You also had to break up Tulare. You had to break up Hanford. You had to break up Lindsay. You had to break all these towns that have 80,000 people, and they're all being divided into 2 and 3 congressional districts each. It's insane, you know. And we could solve that problem by saying like, hey, we're going to put into our gerrymandering law that you just don't get to break up cities of that are under 300,000 people. Yeah, you know,
for the effect, that's still mostly law, I think, but it's been a long time since I've read those
well,
cases.
not
Um,
here, not in Texas, not in a lot of places.
Fair enough. We got to go to Bart because he has an answer for you. Plus, we want to give him a chance to ask another question or a comment. And then, Sandon, if you have anything. But we're almost out of time, gentlemen. Bart, the show is yours.
Okay, real quick. Jeff, the prior conversation on the gerrymandering, I haven't read that decision yet, but I tend to agree with where Jeff was coming from on that. Maybe it's because we're both lawyers. I don't know. um, but Stephen, what's your recommendation? Getting back to the truth issue, I've been thinking about this a lot because it seems to come up like every single day. You can't like try to read anything in the news without going, oh my God, that can't possibly be true. Like the thing with the attacks on the boats, basically civilian boats, off the coast of Venezuela and Colombia, wherever they're doing this. My first impression when I heard about, Pete Hegseth did this or he did that, my first reaction was, oh, come on, how does anybody know that?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, all these guys are sitting around in secret rooms where people aren't talking about what's going on because this is all national security stuff. But now a few days have gone by and it looks like, yeah, Pete Hegseth was watching, and he obviously was telling people things. Okay, that's fine. But how do we as normal people, other than allowing time to go by and additional research to come out, how do we form judgments? Because we're being asked to do it minute by minute.
Yeah, yeah. I would say first, like, realize you don't have to have an instant judgment. So the first thing, I mean, I'll just walk you through my process with this story. So the Washington Post puts out this story, and I say to myself, okay, I'm going to pay attention to this because the Washington Post is a news organization that has actual reporters with actual sources. But I also know that what they're going to do is write a narrative, write a story based on what their sources say. And so that's probably going to leave some stuff out, and there's going to be a lot of context missing. But then the New York Times comes out with a story, and they say, well, our original reporting and our sources say that this is what happened. And then what you can do is you can take the New York Times and the Washington Post story and say, well, actually, there's a large part of this that where they don't disagree. And you sort of say, on the parts where they disagree, I'm going to downgrade those to, 10%. And the parts where they agree, I'm going to up that up to about a 65. So I'm going to proceed with the assumption that like in the areas where they disagree, they could both be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
One could be right, one could be wrong, but I'm not going to move forward with that assumption yet. That's not a strong enough piece of evidence. And if subsequent reporting says, okay, now we have the Trump administration talking to congressional officials, and then we have a second wave of reporting saying, here's the evidence that the Trump administration is now introducing. So first, we would assume that the information that they are introducing is the best facts for them.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, okay, so what's the best argument for the legality of these strikes according to them? And what you find is and then you have to start weighing who is saying what. In other words, like I would put somebody like, and maybe you wouldn't, but I would put somebody like Tom Cotton on the side of someone who I don't automatically dismiss what he says. And he says, okay, I've looked at this evidence, and to my mind, there is an argument that what happened was eh, legal and reasonable. So to me, I'm sort of still holding out in some part of my brain the idea that it's possible that there's something that I haven't considered that wasn't in the New York Times or the Washington Post story, that what happened could be legal and reasonable. And if I had a candid survey of all the facts, so I say, all right, well, I'm going to hold out the possibility that there could be more to this story. Uh, but then I have to also weigh the Trump administration's current and past actions and say, on balance, if you were to ask me right now, here's my best guess as to
Mhm.
what actually happened and who's actually at fault. But, and this is just my survey of all of these sources as they stand right now.
I have a nuance to your answer, Professor, that I think you'll concur with. Lots of people seem to be willing to lie to the public or their friends, or is occasionally or often just out in the world. But few people are willing to lie under oath when there's a possibility they're going to go to jail over that lie.
I would say
Some are,
let's say fewer.
a lot fewer. I'd go to jail over a lie. I don't know. I'm going to just tell you the
Well,
truth.
I'm always struck, and I know this is just my own particular thing. I'm always struck with how many students are willing to lie to me in my office for
Okay.
a long time before they finally admit that they lied, and how
Yeah.
many of them are willing to lie to deans and VPs and the president of the college. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm shocked at how many people, because I know that I would break under. I would just admit what I did,
Yeah.
but
And move on.
I really, I'm
All right.
I
I still.
underestimate
All
how
right.
many people
So
are willing
guys,
to lie.
let me make
Yeah, yeah, Bart.
I got one more very
Yeah.
minor point, and this
Yeah.
is just I want to throw this in here because Stephen and I on the chat we're going back and forth on how many people died of cocaine overdoses in the U.S. And the CDC reported that in 2024 it was 22,174, which is kind of an amazingly exact number. Let's use the was it David Broder or which columnist, Stephen, did you mention a little while ago with the
Uh,
government program for the death
George
penalty?
Will. That was an
Okay,
old
George Will. All right, let's apply the George Will rule to the 22,174 deaths from cocaine overdoses. We now have a presidential administration that is using how many zillions of dollars worth of military equipment and personnel to chase people around in the Caribbean so that we can prevent 22,174 deaths a year. As a normal citizen, that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, and it is also not directly related to those deaths.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
and it just goes to the point where we say, we got Kristi Noem saying, Mr. President, you've saved hundreds of thousands of lives.
Yeah.
That is a lie because
Yeah.
it's impossible to save hundreds of thousands of lives when, I mean, every one of those 22,000 deaths is a tragedy. But 22,000 is not hundreds of thousands.
No,
If he
it's not
saved
even a rounding
all of
error.
if he saved all of their lives, it wouldn't be hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
So, and if next year that number is 21,000, we will say that you did not do the thing you said you were going to do. So I would just say, like, okay, now who do we know we don't need to believe? We don't need to listen to. We don't need to listen to Kristi Noem. She is either stupid or a liar, or she's ignorant. But
Yes, you are not going to get a cabinet post, Professor, by
I know.
talking.
But I would just say, like anybody who says a statement like that, you have no choice but to conclude this person is either a moron, a liar, or totally ignorant and says things to the president based on complete and total ignorance.
Yeah. Bart, thanks for bringing out that number. You good to go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm glad you got that in though, because it makes exactly the point I was trying to
Yeah.
make.
Exactly.
I didn't
That's
know
why
what
I
the
did
number
it. Yeah.
was, but I knew it was a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Shannon. Sandon, this was unfair to you by not giving you at least a bite at the apple. You don't have to take it, but if you'd like to add in some insight or a question, please be brief.
Be very brief. And again, thank you all. It's always good to hear the discussion. I saw in the news there, I'm not going to remember his name, Sri Thanendur, a Democratic candidate, starting impeachment proceedings against Hegseth. This was a couple of days ago. And there was one of the other congressmen said, "Oh, that's just Sri. That's just how that guy acts." Um, I really took exception to that, even though I guess in the computer I'm set up to be a liberal. That's what they think I am. I will honestly say I'm not sure what I am, but I'm kind of sick of it. Like congressmen, congress people don't. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to just say, "Oh, that's just him acting crazy." It's like you're a congressperson. Like you're supposed to be the example. I know that's pie in the sky
Yeah, I'm
and
not
it's
sure I agree
cultural.
with you, Sandon. What's your question for the professor?
Should do Congress do in this case? It feels like the culture has let a lot of people off the hook. Like you get to act crazy if that's just you, and that's gotten into Congress people. I mean, everyone said that Trump just that's just Trump. He does that on the golf course. He does this or that. Do we need to be holding more to account on that and not accept that as a culture?
Lovely question.
Well, great question. Let me tie it in with the overall theme of the episode. If what you want to do is actually solve this problem, what we should be doing collectively is focusing on convincing two-thirds of Republican senators that supporting President Trump, and I should say supporting the idea that President Trump should remain in office. Um, you should you should focus on getting two-thirds of Republican senators to understand that having President Trump remain in office is bad for them and bad for the country because they're the only ones who matter. uh, the only reason Nixon resigned is when the Republican Party and the Republican senators turned on Nixon. Because once the Republican senators turn on Trump, then it will start. So then you will get a conviction. Then it matters what happens in the House, and then you could actually remove Trump from office. But short of that, much of this is, I mean, I shouldn't say theater. It's not. I mean, there's a role to be played by every single congressman. Short of that, but if what your goal is actually is getting this behavior to stop, there is only one way to stop it. Because as long as President Trump is in office, he has the pardon power.
So,
He has
Professor,
control of the Justice Department.
practically on that very narrow issue, I concur. But let me remind you of your advice of a couple months ago. You said if you really want to make an impact in America nationally, go volunteer for a local city council candidate or a mayoral or a school board. Get engaged, make up a phone call and get engaged in your local community. Go to church or go to a Rotary Club and engage and make the kind of culture that you want. And if everybody does that, then other things will percolate up. So practically, I agree with your answer. But
I'm not disagreeing with myself.
right.
You know, Sandon's argument was about what should a legislator do.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
not what should the American people do.
Yeah.
So me screaming about this on Facebook or shutting off, killing my friendships with others because they aren't, supporting the X position X, Y, or Z, that's not going to do anything. And that Republican senator might not listen to you. But if you are in a position to influence a
Excellent.
Republican senator who can be influenced, you should be influencing that Republican senator by
Yeah.
saying what would be good for you and what would be good for the country is if Trump was no longer the president. And because he is guilty of doing hundreds, thousands of impeachable offenses, uh, any one of which would have sent any other president into. I mean, I was covering the Iran-Contra scandal, and in my classes, I was covering the Benghazi scandal in Obama. Trump does worse, does 1,000 worse things every day.
Well, not every day.
Yes. It is there is so much corruption and law breaking that, I mean, the stuff that we think of the scandal plagued Warren Harding. Like, there are people in Trump's cabinet who have done 10, 20, 30 things worse than what happened in the Teapot Dome scandal. And people in Trump's, stuff that goes into the history books because it involves, Jimmy Carter's brother, or, during the Neil Bush, like the stuff that Neil Bush did, it is like he was nothing compared to the hundreds and thousands of things being committed, crimes being committed by people in the orbit of Donald Trump every day. So
we're way over. I hate ending the
sorry.
show on a bummer note like that. Can you transfer all your world's history and national psyche into some better statement than that? End us on a positive note.
Well, I mean, today when my kids were leaving for school, I hugged both of them and told them how much I loved them. So, like, that's way more important to my own happiness. And that when they come home for school, I'm going to be excited to see them again.
I love that. And we're just going to end the show with that. Thank you, Professor. Have a wonderful day. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us. Truth, it matters. Listen to Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men. Okay. Have a great day, gentlemen.
Yeah. See you.
Thanks, Professor Tootle.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.